Chechnya's come a long way city on the planet.
There should be thorough and independent investigation of all these human rights abuses. That's a whole range, clearly. Unlawful killings.
You know what's wild? When a country says it wants freedom and the response is tanks, bombs, and the death of thousands. Sounds like Ukraine, right? Or maybe Georgia? Well, long before those made the headlines, there was Chechnya, a tiny mountain republic, home to a tough, independent people who said no to Moscow. And for that, Russia crushed them twice, with a brutality so extreme even war itself seemed ashamed. So why don't we learn about it? Why don't they teach us how Russia erased towns, gunned down civilians, and turned cities into cemeteries?
Ramzan Kadyrov being sworn in as president of Chechnya. 2 years on, and Russia's rewarded the former separatist fighter for bringing stability to the Muslim Republic.
Let's find out what really happened in the Chechen Wars and why this brutal history still matters today. So, who are the Chechens? They're mostly Muslim, with their own language, culture, and identity, very different from Russians. Because of that difference, they've been targeted for centuries. Even Stalin, back in 1944, deported almost 500,000 of them to Siberia. Thousands died just in the journey. And when the Soviet Union started to collapse in 1991, Chechens weren't waiting around. They declared independence. Their leader, Djokhar Dudayev, was a former Soviet Air Force general turned rebel president. But Moscow wasn't having it. At first, they ignored Chechnya. Russia had bigger problems, like not collapsing entirely. But by 1994, things changed. Russia's president, Boris Yeltsin, decided to fix Chechnya. At first, he tried using local warlords and militias to topple the Chechen government. It backfired badly. The separatists captured Russian soldiers and humiliated Yeltsin. Embarrassed and pissed off, he signed Presidential Decree number 2137. And just like that, war began. On December 11th, 1994, the First Chechen War kicked off. Russian jets bombed the capital, Grozny, while 3 armoured columns rolled in from the north, west and south. Russia assumed this would be easy, big country versus small rebel region. But that arrogance would cost them. On December 31st, the Russians launched a full assault on Grozny. Chechens were ready. They'd turned the city into a fortress. They booby-trapped streets, built bunkers, and lined the alleys with RPG teams. It became a nightmare for the Russian troops. Some battalions lost half their men in one day, and we're talking elite units here. Now, you may ask what Russia's response was after that. Well, from January 1995, Grozny was pounded by bombs, missiles, and artillery non-stop. Civilians died by the thousands. Hospitals, homes, schools, nothing was spared. One doctor broke down after pulling a sheet over a dead child and screamed to a journalist, "How can they bomb women and children every damn day?" By the time Russia claimed the ruined city on January 19th, around 35,000 civilians were dead. But this wasn't the end, not even close. Chechen rebels fled into the mountains and countryside. From there, they launched guerrilla attacks that kept Russian soldiers constantly on edge. Moscow needed a new tactic, and that meant cleansing operations. Sounds clean, right? In reality, they were anything but. Russian troops raided villages, arrested anyone suspicious, looted homes, and committed war crimes. Torture, executions, even rape. The symbol of this horror? Samashki. In April 1995, Russian forces surrounded the village. They claimed they were hunting 300 militants. In reality, there were maybe 40 local men defending their homes. Villagers tried to negotiate. They asked for more time, said they didn't have 264 weapons Russia demanded. But the deadline passed and hell began. Tanks fired randomly, grenades were thrown into basements, soldiers executed people, even children. Over 100 civilians were killed. One survivor said, "What they did here, you shouldn't even do to animals." Moscow, of course, denied everything, but the bodies said otherwise. While Russia was crushing Chechens, some rebels struck back. On June 14th, 1995, 95 Chechen fighters crossed into Russia and stormed a hospital in Budyonovsk, taking almost 2,000 hostages, including mothers and newborns. They had one demand: Russia had to pull out of Chechnya. Moscow tried to storm the hospital 3 times. Each time failed. Hostages died in the crossfire. The rebels killed more. In the end, 1,150 people were dead before Russia gave in and started peace talks. The whole thing was a massive embarrassment for Yeltsin, and that wasn't the only time. In early 1996, the war hit a stalemate. Russia held the cities, Chechens ruled the mountains. Then their leader Dudayev was killed in a Russian missile strike. But instead of breaking their spirit, it lit a fire. Chechen fighters launched a bold counterattack on Grozny in August 1996. Within 3 hours, most of the city was back under their control. Russia was humiliated again. By the end of that month, they agreed to a ceasefire. In 1997, both sides signed a peace treaty. Chechnya wasn't recognized as independent, but it was left alone for a while. The country was in ruins. Russia refused to pay reparations, no jobs, no order, no future. Warlords filled the power vacuum, and in that chaos, something darker crept in: Islamic extremism. Jihadist groups saw Chechnya as ripe for influence. Russia, meanwhile, was recovering. By 1999, Yeltsin was out, and Vladimir Putin, a young, fierce nationalist, was in. And Putin? He was not going to let Chechnya go, especially not after what came next. In August 1999, 2,000 Chechen Islamists crossed into Dagestan and sparked weeks of fighting. Then, in September, bombs exploded in apartment buildings across Russia. Almost 300 people died. The government blamed Chechen militants immediately. But here's the twist. 2 FSB agents were caught planting another bomb in Ryazan. Moscow said it was just a training exercise. Sure. Putin didn't wait. On October 1st, 1999, he declared the Chechen government illegitimate and sent in nearly 100,000 troops. The Second Chechen War had begun. This time, Russia was smarter, slower, more brutal. They bombarded Grozny from afar. On October 21st, a missile hit a busy market, killing 68 civilians. They said it was an illegal weapons market. Later, they said no civilians were there. Then, they blamed Chechens for bombing themselves. It was chaos wrapped in lies. And escaping the city didn't guarantee safety. On December 3rd, Russian soldiers gunned down a convoy of refugees. At least 40 people died. Later, airstrikes hit another convoy near Chechnya. 25 more civilians were killed. By February 2000, Grozny was liberated. Or rather, what was left of it. The city had been so thoroughly destroyed, the UN called it the most destroyed city on Earth. And the brutality didn't stop there. In the village of Novye Aldi, over 80 civilians were executed. In Chechnya, Russia dropped vacuum bombs, weapons that suck the air from your lungs. After hours of bombing, survivors were forced into a convoy and told to leave. 2 hours later, Russian jets opened fire on that same convoy. One witness said, "Every car was hit. They burned before my eyes." And after that, the Russians ordered the bodies to be burned. No one was held accountable. Moscow went silent. The European Court of Human Rights investigated the massacre. Russia ignored it. Still, the war raged on. Chechen rebels, now mostly Islamists, retaliated with more attacks on civilians. In October 2002, 40 militants took over 850 hostages in a Moscow theatre. Putin refused to negotiate. Russian forces gassed the building, killing all the militants, but also 132 hostages. Then in 2004, they stormed a school in Beslan. 1,000 hostages, most of them kids. After 3 days, Russian troops attacked. What followed was absolute carnage. Over 300 people died, many of them children. Once again, Russia won. But at what cost? By late 2003, Putin had installed a pro-Moscow leader, Akhmat Kadyrov, as Chechnya's puppet president. The fighting slowed, the separatists faded, and by 2009, the war was officially over. But here's the thing, it never really ended. Between 70,000 and 200,000 civilians were killed. 400,000 were forced to flee. The death toll for fighters? Between 11,000 and 25,000 on both sides. And what did it all achieve? Chechnya lost its independence, Russia gained a reputation, and Putin, he became the iron-fisted strongman he's known as today. The methods he used, bombing civilians, denying war crimes, crushing resistance, would later be repeated in Georgia, in Syria, and of course, in Ukraine. And yet, barely anyone talks about Chechnya. This story, it's not just about war, it's about erasure. A group of people erased from maps, from headlines, from history books. So now, let me ask you, if your town, your family, your children were caught in a war like this, would the world even know your name? Let us know in the comments. What shocked you the most about Chechnya's forgotten war? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories, and we'll see you in the next video.